You believe in Jesus? Yes, I do. Well, you're going to meet him.
And welcome to Steel Creed, where we connect faith and reason to ordinary experience by steelmanning aspects of Christendom. Today we'll be discussing the clause God as Creator in the Apostles' Creed. And joining me, as always, is my good friend Nate.
Greetings, Ian. Greetings, listeners, and greetings, fellow heretics. Let's do it.
All right, so
previously on X-Men.
The things that we had discussed was we're going through the Creed, and so we said, all right, well, what's the purpose of creeds in the first place? And so we gave an argument for creeds as such, ritual as such. And then the first clause of the creed is, I believe in God the Father. And thus we had our discussion of, okay, well, what does that mean? And now we come to the next part of it, creator of heaven and earth. And so then again, we must discuss, all right, well, what does that mean, God as creator? And in particular, how does this inform action? And so going back to our idea of what do we mean by faith, we say that faith consists of three components. It is propositional, it is unfalsifiable, and it is material or praxeological. That is to say, it informs action. And so if we affirm that God is creator, we're going to comport ourselves in one way, and if we deny that, we will comport ourselves differently. And so, this being part of the creed, I think it's a good time to discuss that. What is it, like, if you presume that God is creator, what does that mean for your everyday life? And so that's the purpose of this discussion here. So with that as the setup, do you have any opening remarks?
No. What are our three things about faith again? We have
it's propositional, unfalsifiable, and material or praxeological.
What's that last one mean? Material and praxeological.
Praxeal of or relating to action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So very briefly, Ludwig von Mises in his treatise Human Action introduces the idea of praxeology and derives his economic theory from action as such, economic action being a subset of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the unique thing about Christianity and how this eventually informs action, for example, the Greek philosophers, they kind of, I don't know, deduced isn't the right word because they didn't figure it out, but they...
Posited, perhaps.
They realized that matter, couldn't be created. It's there, essentially. Right. Mm-hmm. And so their way of thinking about that is that the universe has been there, for an infinite amount of time. It has no beginning. Because if matter, can't be destroyed or created, then for it to have a beginning, there'd have to be a creator.
Right.
And this was the common secular belief right up until the 20th century, at least as far as modern science is concerned. So obviously, if you believe that there's a creator, it's going to change how you operate versus if you think everything is just an accident or random chance or something along those lines. So I think that's probably the reason it informs action in a general sense.
Yes, and I agree with you. And as I was preparing the notes for this, I thought this is almost an extended meditation on, of course, we already argued for the existence of God, in a very early episode. And this is, I think, an extended meditation on the implications of that, at least in my notes.
Cool.
Yeah. And so I suppose one of the main things that comes to my mind, so my notes here are just simply sort of a series of things that I deduce from the idea of God as creator, which do inform action. And the first one is that it makes sense to look for purpose for myself. And so I think one of the existential problems which confronts almost anybody is that I think people often, not often, but we'll say at times, but it applies to, I think, almost everyone, will say something along the lines of, I don't even know what I'm doing. What am I doing here? It's just, life just feels like it has no purpose, right? I think that ennui is universal to
Ennui.
universal to the human experience. When you say something like that, when someone says something like that, like, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? I feel like I have no purpose. That question doesn't make any sense absent a creator, right? Because if there is no creator, what purpose? You're just here.
Yeah, I think the desire for purpose is one thing. I think another indicator is that we find a purpose in things. You know, like we want to look at the world and find purpose in it. We want to look at that tree and understand why it's here. We want to, look at the stars and understand why they're here and why they're, what's going on, and we want to observe the universe and see purpose behind it. It's just what would you call that? A primal desire of humanity. So that almost in and of itself is some type of proof. Like, why would something that came from nothing by pure accident have such a strong desire to see purpose in something?
Right.
I would think it's because it originated from something that saw purpose in what it created, which would be us and the rest of life or the rest of the universe. So
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I guess in a certain sense, you don't even have to posit it. You simply have to observe that everyone speaks that way, right? And to your point, what'd you say? What's the purpose in that tree? Is that what you said?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. And so then that's another thing that I have on my notes here, is that not only does it make sense to look for purpose for myself, because we posit a creator. I cannot imagine, if you will, mere fact. And so in the last episode, we talked about deriving an ought from an is. And one of the things I find amusing is that atheists seem to have a hard time speaking without talking about the purpose of something, right? So even your hardcore evolutionary atheist biologists will say things like, oh, well, we see this development over here, but not there. What's the purpose of that? And the answer is there isn't any. Absent a God, there isn't any purpose. All you're really observing when you say something like that is, well, there's adaptive fitness of that characteristic for that time and place. That's literally it. Mm-hmm. There is no purpose to it. And so I think this was, I can't remember if I mentioned it on the show previously, but one of my subordinates previously was he still is, but he's no longer my subordinate. He had his PhD in evolutionary biology, and he was, what's the right way to say this? He had very quintessential characteristics of such a person. And so in his cubicle, he had, the Uncle Sam, like, I want you,
Right.
pointing at. So instead of Uncle Sam, it was Uncle Charles.
Okay.
It was Darwin. And it said, I want you to be rational or something like that, Like, he was that kind of guy. But when I would, because he was physically present in the office, I was remote. But when I would go into town for whatever reason, for business, I'd take him out for dinner and we would just shoot the breeze, sort of as two professionals. And, I would speak to him about these matters, right? And he fully admitted that his profession could be boiled down to the question is, why do winners win? Right? Which is to say, hey, there's genetic drift, but sometimes it's adaptive, right? But there is no purpose. And so even when they speak, they find it difficult to not make reference to that. They find it difficult to simply say, adaptive for a finite time and place, you know.
It's interesting. I just got done reading Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man, Tom Holland's book Dominion. And maybe like the second or third to last chapter was about the late 19th century. And he kind of coupled the story about the rise of modern science and Darwin himself with Nietzsche.
Sure. Yeah.
And what he was talking about is those late 19th century progressives, all of their assumptions were Christian. A lot of them were. The only real honest one was Nietzsche, basically. But he also talked about how did that affect them. So like Charles Darwin's wife was a committed Christian for her entire life.
Really?
And she has some quote at the end where he's just like, I'm going to have to put it in the notes because I'm not going to get it right here off the dome. But it was something along the lines of, I think my husband's giving into despair. Because my husband basically is starting to adopt this philosophy that it's all meaningless.
Right.
But he doesn't really believe that.
Yeah.
But back to the Steel Creed and living how you want to, by your values or what's the right term? Excuse me. On the conceptual model here.
Well, in the concept,
the conceptual landscape.
All it is everyone has faith. The question is, what is your faith? Mm-hmm. And how does that impact how you live?
Yeah, so paradoxically with those people, they wanted to say, okay, now we can prove that God didn't need to be involved in creating life.
Right.
And we're going to use all these new scientific tools that we have to make humanity so much better.
Sure.
It's like, then why are you bothering? And then, things like the eugenics movement came out of that and stuff like that. But it's just very interesting how hard it is to beat this, specifically the Christian worldview, even when you're trying to combat it. These assumptions are so deeply instilled in Western culture specifically that even our best atheist friends have a hard time not having the same lexicon or religious devotion that is clear in Christianity. They demand orthodoxy. Well, where they got that from?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think it's very difficult to even explain certain ways humans universally behave absent a creator. So, for instance, when you're talking about atheist friends or something like that, like even going back to, say, the Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, that was a religious movement. It had its ritual, right? You posted the black square to show solidarity. It had its original sin, which was racism and slavery. It had its taboos, which is you couldn't say the N-word, Meanwhile, these people would have no problem blaspheming or, dropping F-bombs right and left or anything like that, right? Nonetheless, they still had a taboo. It's just different than the Christian taboo, right? They had their acts of penance, land recognitions.
Buying carbon credits, planting an extra tree here and there.
Right, yeah.
I fly a private jet, but I offset it with carbon credits.
Yeah, so it's okay. So, I mean...
Why don't we sell carbon credits? Why don't you and I sell carbon credits? And plant trees?
I don't know about the mechanics of that.
You set up a website. You say, you give me $200, I'll plant a tree that will, offset this much carbon dioxide over its lifespan. Boom.
What if we set up a website, but we just lie about it?
That wouldn't be very Christian. I would at least want to plant the tree for real.
It takes a lot of work. It's way easier to manipulate HTML. All right, we'll get on that tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll get the PayPal set up. What's the Squarespace?
Yeah.
Squarespace. Get the Squarespace
Make
going.
a Wix website.
Yeah. But the point is that there are certain things that seem sort of inescapable, right? And the only question is there an ultimate reality to which they conform or isn't there, right? So, for instance, with the Black Lives Matter thing, going back to that, is there an ultimate reality? Well, I'm not a fan of racism, but clearly most of humanity is and has been for all of time, right? I mean, racism is not a new thing, nor is slavery a new thing. And so to be against it, while I think ordinate, clearly is not universal, and therefore I don't think you can make a statement about, therefore it's, what would you say, objectively good, right? I think these people are a product of their time. Whereas if you adopt the Christian view, there is an objectivity to it, and the ontic referent is what God intends for each of us. And among those things is not slavery or a racist attitude.
And I think that gets lost because we're so used to sitting, we're in our own culture, in our own time and space, and we're afraid that what you're talking about, these new religions essentially, are going to somehow supplant the one that's been around for 2,000 years. And like I said, finishing up this book it's fresh in my mind.
Sure.
But what I've really noticed is that any like major philosophy, like go back into Nietzsche and the eugenics and this idea that the strong man and the government or whatever can fix everything.
The Ubermensch.
The Ubermensch. That really died out after Hitler and Stalin. It kind of died out, and with the
It was replaced with the state.
what the
Communism won.
what the author said is that even though Stalin killed way more people than Hitler, the reason communism gets a little bit more of the past, at least in the academic circles, is because at least the goal is to make everyone equal. At least it has some type of seemingly moral goal.
Yeah.
Whereas the Nietzschean philosophy doesn't. It's just all about power.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that once that faded, after World War II, then you get the sexual revolution. Mm-hmm. And basically that's tearing down, if you go back to the ancient Greek and Roman world, there was a hierarchy in society. Mm-hmm. And the further you were up that ladder, the more, essentially sexual pleasures were at your disposal, and people were at your disposal. And so the whole sexual revolution chapter of this book is like, okay, in the 60s, we're just gonna go for it. Everybody can do whatever they want.
Sure.
And that ends with Harvey Weinstein and Me Too. And so everyone was like, oh, yo, Hugh Hefner, why are we making this guy look great? It's like, guess what? All those guys like Hugh Hefner and Harvey Weinstein and all these big movie producers or whoever, sports athletes, who were trying to live that pagan lifestyle where it's just like, I'm at the top of the heap, so I get to do whatever I want with women or little boys or whatever.
Whoever, whatever,
well,
whenever.
I mean, our society, we haven't fully cycled through that yet, but like we're already to the point where we're saying like that was evil.
Yeah.
It only took like 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
And so that's what gives me hope, the transgender stuff. It already looks like we're cycling through it. The transgender thing only took 15 years to get over. Yeah, it looks like we're already on the path.
I think that's on its way out.
But my point,
to God's ears.
For hope, we were talking about hope before we hit record.
Yeah.
And we thank my daughter for bringing that up.
Yes.
So, like, if you're ever feeling really terrible about the direction Western society is going, just know it's going to burn itself out. Whatever stupid thing we're trying right now, it's only going to last a couple decades. That's what it would appear like.
Yeah. Well, to that point, though, again, that only makes sense. That statement only makes sense in the presence of a creator. Why? Because if there is a creator, that means that which is has an intention behind it, and that's the argument we made last time, that you in fact can derive an ought from an is if you suppose that the is comes from a mind, comes from a purpose driven mind. And so, since there is a purpose for what we ought to be doing, what it is intended for us to do, what that also means is, on the flip side, there's all sorts of things we ought not to do. And it's not surprising that if we do those things, calamity ensues. And so that's why I go back to the illustration of God as auto manufacturer, where the auto manufacturer lovingly gives you the car manual with your purchase, right? And says, oh, by the way, maybe you ought to do this and not that with the car. Now you can look at that and say, screw you, man, I'm going to do what I want. But then you're going to end up by the side of the road. It's the easiest example I give when I teach the basic beliefs class at church is it's disobeying God's law is grasping the knife by the blade. You can do it if you like, but the knife was made for a purpose, and there's a proper way to use it, which is grasping it by the handle, and there's an improper way to use it, which is grasping it by the blade. And you will harm yourself if you do the latter, right?
Yeah, so let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because when you start talking about God as creator, the issue of science comes into play. So
Yep.
let's pretend science is a knife. All right.
Sure.
What does it look like to grab science by the blade?
Good question. Well, I suppose I tend to think of science as essentially it's an intellectual mechanism of negation, right?
Wow.
Which-
What does that mean? You got intellectual mechanism. You had me.
Yeah.
Negation.
Negation. Because science never affirms anything. It simply creates counterexamples.
Okay.
So in science you have your theories, right? And so the theory leads to, if it's a useful theory, right? Any good theory is going to lend itself to the construction of experiments. You perform the experiments. If they come back the way you expect, you go, the theory works thus far,
All right, it's worked so far, but we're not out yet.
which is not a full-throated affirmation of the theory, right? It's just saying, well, it's worked so far. Whereas if the experiment comes back and it's not what you expect, then you revise the theory, right? And if it's a total disaster, you throw it out entirely, right? And so that's when I say negation, that's what I mean, is that science is a mechanism that you use to cast down ideas, right? So one aspect, and it's very useful. I'm a big fan of it. even though I'm a mathematician, which in a certain sense is, and you'll appreciate this. This is where you and I can come together. You being the engineer, even though, like in a certain sense, the theorems that I write down are true, independent of physical reality. Say, nonetheless, I have made it a habit to program my computer to do simulations. And so for instance, if an equation holds, right, then it should hold for randomly generated numbers. So oftentimes when I think I have something correctly, what I will do is I will program my computer to randomly generate like 1 million different random numbers and run them through the formula.
Okay.
And if they hold, I go, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Nice.
But then to your point about what does it mean to grasp it by the blade, one answer is if you, and this is a general statement, you should never be a slave to your tools. The tool is supposed to serve us, not us the tool. And science as an intellectual mechanism is to serve us. And therefore you would be foolish to think that science is the totality of what is or what can be known. And it's particularly...
Or that science can tell you
Right.
anything.
Because
right?
it can't.
Right.
Because by its nature, it negates, it doesn't affirm. And so if all you have is science, what you will have is this sort of drifting, listless kind of view of the world because you can never be sure, right? So that's one thing, is that it can lead to a great deal of intellectual consternation. But then, of course, the other thing is that, and this is a much more modest statement, which is that it produces grand tools. So I think on this show we've joked about and spoken of, large language models, LLMs, right? Great tools. But, I mean, come on, you and I both know that someone somewhere on a server in Russia is creating all sorts of depraved AI pornography, with this stuff, right? Like, it's got to be happening.
I don't know who it was the other day.
In a world of 8 billion people, someone is using it in the most dastardly way.
Well, and then the other thing is that putting so much emphasis, like, would it be correct to say, if I'm understanding large learning language models, they're
Yeah.
big neural networks, right?
Yep.
Neural networks have been around for a couple decades. Now we've just
60s, Rosenblatt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, all we've done is come up with enough computing power to get to predict the next word. I mean,
Yeah.
And then you have these allegedly
The next N
responsible
tokens.
person, and it wasn't Sam Altman, maybe it was, but someone said, we're about to hit super intelligent AI.
No, we're not. No.
And like Musk was saying that, Musk was guilty of saying that and then starting up Grok, it's just all marketing. And it's just the irresponsible nature
Yeah.
of what you can attribute to things, I think comes from a place where you overemphasize the capability of science
Yeah.
to do stuff.
To do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Science with a capital S. Yeah, absolutely. It's myopic. It's irresponsible. And again, it's improper use of your tools. Don't be a slave to your tools. Treat them as tools. I have frankly found LLMs to be a great resource for this show and for the work that I do. But then I double check the results. What's so funny to me about the whole conversation evolving around them is like, oh, I just can't tell fact from reality. It's like, no. Nothing's changed. Because you learned when you were 6 years old that you shouldn't believe everything you read, and you shouldn't believe everything you see on TV, and you shouldn't believe everything you see in the movies, and you shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet, and you shouldn't believe everything you read on Wikipedia. So why is this any different? You are responsible for your own utterances. Go corroborate it, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I can't help you. It's just most people take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, sure.
And so you can see all these articles
And then I
now
make fun of them.
where they're saying like, the news websites, Wall Street Journal, CNN, all these, they've seen their traffic decrease like 70% or something. Or
Yeah.
I'm just making up a number, but it's something large. 70% over the last 2 years.
But you see, at
because
least you
people are
admitted
getting their news from AI. It's like, well, people are saying like, I don't want to read your stupid article. Just
Sure.
I want to Google what did Trump do today.
Yeah.
And I just want to get a summary.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm in. Now, obviously, if you're using AI and you're taking it at face value, like you said, you're kind of an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you're any less of an idiot or more of an idiot than the guy who's been using Facebook to get all his news for the last 15 years. So
I think if you do not, so again, this goes, I hate to be a broken record, but it is our show. It all goes back to action, which is that there's a big difference between reading something and just going, that's interesting, versus acting on it and basing your life on it. And so, for instance, I have an acquaintance who recently had a outpatient heart procedure, okay?
outpatient heart procedure?
Yeah.
They just like put a stent in and then you're going home in the evening or something? Or?
I don't quite remember.
Okay.
He explained it, and it went in one ear and out the other. But the point is that it's one thing to read about the procedure or read about the doctor who's going to be performing and go, that's interesting, versus I'm going to put my life in your hands.
Her life was in your hands.
This is our concern, dude.
If you're going to do that, well, then you might vet the doctor a little bit more assiduously, right? You might go, well, how many of these have you performed? And, what's your background? And how long have you been doing this? And, any complaints? How's your Yelp review? That sort of thing. Because you're going to have to act on it. Similarly, in my most recent video that I did, I made reference to what are known as Lagrange multipliers.
I actually know what those are.
Yeah. Well, but I wanted to reference them properly.
I guess I know Lagrange transforms. He did a bunch of different things, right?
I think you're thinking of Laplace transforms.
Oh, crap. Okay, I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
In your defense, they both did a lot of things. So you've got Laplace, Lagrange, and Legendre.
I think I have learned of Lagrange.
Oh,
though.
you totally have. No, but that's what I'm saying. You got Laplace, Lagrange, and Legendre.
Okay.
All Frenchmen, all math, all in roughly the same period. So it's easy to get them mixed up. But anyway, the point is that I was trying to make a reference to the original material. Like, when did this come out? And so I used an LLM, and it came out in this. It doesn't really sound like Kermit, but it came out in this year and this year. Okay, but I didn't just put that in the notes. I went and I found the original. What would it be? Analytique mécanique, like in French, and then I found an English version of it, and I had them side by side and was looking at them to make sure that, yep. In his section on hydrostatics, he develops Lagrange multipliers so that he can solve a problem in hydrostatics. Like, I corroborated it. I didn't just take, what's the one I use? Perplexity at its word. So.
It's almost like a Cartman. I'd be like, Butters, do it. Do it, Butters.
gotta do.
Just trust me.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I think that's how science can go wrong. Is that, but science goes wrong the way almost everything goes wrong, which is you have elevated it to too highly a place, right? Lewis has a great, again, you can replace me with an LLM trained on Lewis, but like Lewis has got a great essay called First and Second Things. The whole point of the essay is summarized, he says it near the end. If you put first things first, you get second things. If you put second things first, you don't even get first things. So that's how it goes wrong.
So I think one confusion, and this does a lot of harm, and I think this is important to address because it informs how a lot of people act, is they say, well, if I believe God is creator, then I also have to figure out how God went about doing this creating.
Yeah.
And that leads a lot of people down a lot of different paths. That leads to a lot of debates that might be pointless potentially or not very useful. But it also leads people to reject their faith, and all that type of stuff. So let's say someone says to you like, all right, you're telling me God is creator. Does that mean I have to believe X, Y, and Z, whatever that is? Because it seems like this Christian person is telling me I have to believe this. And then this other Christian person is telling me, no, you don't have to believe this. It's okay to believe that, about the scientific, what we can deduce from science about the history of the earth or the history of the universe.
Sure.
Do you have any specific comments from that perspective? People who are really worked up about like, wow, man, maybe I'm reading this crap about, and in all of this, when it comes to God as creator, one thing that I've realized is like, you're talking biology, astrophysics, theoretical physics, geology. You're talking about all these different disciplines of science, which no layperson really has the ability, maybe if you're really smart, you can become a legitimate expert in like two. Most
At best.
Most people can really only hope in a lifetime to become an expert in one.
Right.
And really to put that whole puzzle piece together, you need like I said, 7 or 10 or I don't know, there's a lot.
Yeah.
But people get really hung up. It's just like, oh, I'm watching this YouTube video, and I think I need to reject what my parents taught me or what my pastor taught me.
Yeah, right.
Like so how
I watched The Amazing Atheist.
Yeah, so how do you?
Who's that British guy now? The Cosmic Skeptic.
Yes,
That
Alex
kid.
O'Connor.
Yeah. I swear to you, he's going to become a Christian in 10 years.
Yeah, we'll see. So anyway, how would you advise someone who's wrestling with that type of angst over the scientific history of how that creation came about?
Yeah, sure. So I've had this conversation with multiple people because it certainly is perplexing sometimes, especially for people trained in the sciences who were raised in the church, right? And I think we've touched on this previously, but we can have a more extended meditation now, which is that we really have to be careful about what we mean when we talk about science with a capital S. So let's just take something simple like evolution, okay? Not simple, but common, like evolution. And so evolution makes a very modest claim, which is, hey, changes happen over time at the cellular level, at the genetic level. And it's like, okay, well, that's a pretty mild claim. I can see that. And, well, you look at the parents and then you look at the kid and the kid kind of looks like the parents, but not totally. And, they got their own kind of unique thing going on. And so, yeah, okay. The claim itself that there are changes at the genetic level, at the cellular level, I think that's a very modest claim. And then the idea that sometimes those changes, work really well in a certain environment. Sometimes they don't, right? It's like, okay, well, again, by definition, going back to my subordinate's statement about evolutionary biology as a subject, why do winners win, right? It's like, well, yeah, the people who are, it's a tautology, right? The people who are adapted to survive by definition. Okay, also a modest claim. I'm on board. Therefore, everything you see here came from a single cell organism 10 billion years ago. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, wait, there's some work to be done in that statement, right? And so I think it's very important to say where we draw the line with empiricism. Empiricism is we observe that children have traits of their parents but are themselves unique. That's empirical, right? That some traits are better. So I'm as pale as the day is long. You put me near the equator, I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to die in 3 years.
Yeah, you hate it when it hits like 75.
Yes, it'll be awful, right? I'll get cancer. I'll die of despair. You know, I won't adapt. I will produce no offspring, and that'll be that. That's empirical. Something that happened prehistorically, by definition of being prehistoric, means there are no records, which means therefore it's not empirical. It's purely a guess. It's purely theoretical. And so now we've moved into the realm of unfalsifiability.
In a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
And I would say, for example, if you just look at something like human history. So going back, the history of human civilization, as we know it, goes back 10,000 years. It's not very long if we're talking about written history. We can find pottery and all that type of stuff. And, I know there's cave paintings going further back, but let's just say if I'm just trying to understand what the Egyptians did or what the Mesopotamians did or what the Chinese did a couple thousand years ago, we're dealing with scraps of pottery.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know anything.
Nope.
The amount of information that has survived is less than 0.1%. It's something on that magnitude. And we're trying to say, okay, well, maybe we can get a list of monarchs, and maybe we can piece a list of monarchs together. And when we do that in Egypt, every couple years they start trying to reshuffle the deck on who was pharaoh when, and trying to, monkey with that. So even if you look at something as simple as the history of human civilization, just going back a couple thousand years, it's not super great. When you start looking at the history of life, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with fossils and rocks. And really the best thing that you can do is you can figure out how old the rock is.
At best.
Yeah. And you can see what kinds of animals were alive and fossilized in that layer of rock. It's just not going to tell you a whole lot.
Well, that's the thing, is that I think we have to be modest in the claims that we make based on the evidence that we have. And again, even something like we can tell how old the rock is, right? It's like, well, wait a minute. Where'd that come from? Where'd the formula come from? I'll tell you where the formula came from at a sufficiently general level, which is that we performed a set of experiments on things about which we knew the age. Those experiments allowed us to derive a formula. We then took the formula and ran it backwards. And that's how we say that certain things are 20,000 years old. Now, we've never actually verified the veracity of that formula because no one's been around 20,000 years, or whatever time length you want to put. This rock is 1 million years old. How do you know? You don't know that. You have a formula that you developed on...
It's an approximation.
Well,
but when you're dealing with
the formula,
radioactive
the formula
isotopes...
is an approximation based on data which is relatively small in the time frame. That's my only point.
Okay. So let's say you have a... Okay, I guess what I'm saying is like, there are things that you can know. I'm just making it, it's very skinny. If you want to say this rock is 10 million years old, 10 million years old, plus or minus a million years, or something silly like that. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of like carbon-14 dating. That's how they date all these geological formations. Sure. They look at the radioactive isotopes in the rock, and they can say, okay, we, with a general level of confidence, know that this much was probably in the rock when it got laid down. We can see how much is left. We can attach an age.
Sure, but my point is, when you do that carbon-14 dating...
Well, carbon-14 is that stuff that's only good for, 20, 30,000 years.
Well, but my point is that for whatever time frame for which it's good, you don't actually know that. That's my only point.
Yeah, you don't know the exact age.
It's based... the formula which allows us to do carbon-14 dating is based on data that we have observed, which is relatively small given the span of written history, and assumptions and model assumptions. That's my only point.
Yeah, you're assuming how much carbon-14
and
is
then
present when something.
And then we extrapolate.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not decrying that and saying that's so stupid. It's like, no, that's the best we can do.
Right.
At the same time, we should be humble that that's the best we can do, and not speak about it with the same confidence as we say, oh, I can go up to the roof and drop a rock and it'll fall at 9.81 meters per second square.
I definitely agree with that.
But
It's still science, but the science can tell you a lot less than
Right.
you're counting on it. Some
the-
people
the
are counting on it to
The
tell
further
you.
away you get from actual data, the more skeptical you should be. And the same thing holds true with the climate change stuff, right? Like in 100 years, the oceans will be boiling, or maybe they'll be frozen. Who knows? Like it's like you have no idea. You have no idea. You have models, and again, I'm not trying to decry these people. It's like the models are sophisticated. That's great, but remember, you're taking data that we have here and you're running it out a long time, and a lot can happen. So how about some humility? And so that's my answer to these people when they get hot and bothered about, well, science says this and that. Like, it doesn't, though. Science gives us data, which gives rise to models, which we then extrapolate. That's what science is doing. And don't confuse the extrapolation with reality. The model is not the map. The territory is not the map.
Fair enough. So, I wanted to go through the 4 different groups of people, and kind of talk about how they all essentially have the same approach to this, even though they won't admit it.
All right, let's hear it.
Do you want to do that?
Go for it.
Here's another idea. I'm going to save you a whole lot of money on prisons, but at the same time, we are still going to remove from society many of our more annoying citizens. 4 groups are going away permanently.
Okay, so the first group of people, I'll just tell you who the groups of people are. You have young Earth creationists.
Yeah.
You have old Earth intelligent design, and there's more of these categories. It's not like there's like each one of these is, but you have the young Earth people. You have the old Earth people who are creationists. You have the theistic evolutionists who basically said God used the mechanism of evolution to create all life on Earth. Mm-hmm. And then you have the material evolutionists. Mm-hmm. And most of the secular world is full of material evolutionists. Now,
Yeah, I think that's roughly accurate.
I'm mostly a lay person, but I do have my master's degree in mechanical engineering, and I've done a decent amount of heat transfer and thermodynamics. And as we know, the second law of thermodynamics is, the law of entropy, that you can't get a higher, grade of order without some type of work being done.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
I know that that's what it says. I'm not...
Let me read what I got.
No.
Let me read the actual.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm not going to contradict you. It's that I've never understood precisely what that law means.
Yeah, let me just read it, so
Sure.
we can all be on the same page.
My guess is that there's some sort of differential equation behind it.
All right, so here's the second law of thermodynamics essentially states that the total entropy of an isolated system can only increase or remain constant in a reversible process. So in simpler terms, it means that natural processes tend to move towards a state of greater disorder or randomness.
Right.
And it's impossible for heat to spontaneously flow from a colder to a hotter object without external work being done.
Hold on 1 second.
First, we need to understand that entropy is energy. Energy that can't be used. To state it more specifically, in a closed system, entropy always goes up. That's the second law. Now you know what's up. You can't win, you can't break even, you can't leave the game. Cause entropy will take it all, though it seems a shame. The second law, as we now know, is quite clear to state that entropy must increase and not dissipate.
Colder, hotter object. Okay, yeah, I believe that.
Okay, so let's say you have 2 compartments. One is 10 degrees hotter than the other.
Yep.
If you remove the barrier between the 2 compartments.
Yep, heat goes to the cold.
Right.
Yep.
And so when you look at something like life, and we talked about mutations, and you talked about how evolutionary biology works, and I would say, yeah, sometimes mutations happen, and they create a short-term advantage. But mutations in and of themselves have never been proven to actually add any information to a genome. So if you can't add any information, you're just stuck with what you started with.
I suppose so.
And that's the second law of thermodynamics. You're not going to just get some extra random chains and then those are going to create new organs and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I've never really, as a layperson, I've never really heard a material evolutionist really, have an explanation for that. And another one is like for humans, for example, we have, 23 chromosome pairs. Mm-hmm. And all other major primates have 24.
Really?
Yeah. And so chromosome 2 is fused together. And we're supposed to come from chimps 2 million years ago? It doesn't matter if I think there were chimps 2 million years ago. Even if there were, we seem to be genetically engineered. Now, that's from a layperson's perspective.
Yeah.
But my point is when I read some of the evolutionary guys and material evolutionists, like, this is such a slam dunk. I'm like, you guys haven't actually proven any mechanisms for most of what you're claiming is happening.
Well, that's always been my understanding of these things, is that when you subject these things to any sort of scrutiny, it's a lot of claims and not a lot of evidence,
And I would think, at least in the biological realm, these things should be testable. If natural processes are making them happen, there should be a way to create an experiment to show that it can happen.
That's the thing. What's the right way to say this? Because evolutionary biology has existed as a science for over 100 years, I'm sure there are experiments that they're doing. But again, there's such a world of difference between saying, "Hey, we created this experiment. We took one environment, we made it hot. We took another environment, we made it cold, and lo and behold, the mutations that adapted to it survived longer." It's like, okay, that sounds reasonable. I would buy that. Therefore, we came from apes 2,000 years ago. Whoa! There's such a vast difference between those statements. And all I'm asking is for people to acknowledge that.
Yeah, so group one is material evolutionists. I think I named off the groups. You got theistic, the intelligent design crowd, and then you got the young Earth creationists. Now, with those last three ones, we'll admit, whether you're a young Earth creationist or an intelligent design guy or a theistic evolutionist, you will admit that there has to be some type of supernatural mechanism to make your view of prehistory work. You're admitting up front that God was working in whatever processes I'm hawking today. That God was,
Sure. Yeah.
And obviously with the young Earth creationists, God has to do something really extreme, and to make this whole, slam this all into 10,000 years. But even if you're getting to intelligent design or a theistic evolutionist who will say, hey, yeah, the Earth is somewhere, a couple billion years old, and the universe is probably 13 billion years old.
Yeah.
You're still advocating for supernatural processes happening.
Yeah.
What really gets me about the material evolutionists is that they're trying to advocate for something that completely, from my point of view, denies the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
But they will take a crap on all these other three groups, and it's really easy. Like the young Earth creationist crowd is very easy to crap on. It seems like an easy target, but at least they are admitting that there has to be some type of supernatural intervention.
Sure.
Where the materialistic evolutionist is not.
Yeah.
And I have a table here. There's 4 organizations associated with each of these, and we'll put it in the show notes. So there's Answers in Genesis, which is Ken Ham. He's most popular. There's a lot of creationist organizations, but he probably has the biggest sphere of influence in his organizations. I have their website link. We have the Discovery Institute for the ID guys.
Yeah.
We have
Stephen Meyer.
Yeah, Stephen Meyer and those guys.
Yeah.
Then you have BioLogos, Francis Collins, your favorite.
I love that guy.
And then the material. I can't remember the website I put for the material evolutionists, but I put an American organization, and I had to pick. I was trying to find a science one. Mm-hmm. Most of the evolutionary institutions are for promoting evolutional education.
Yeah.
Now the common thread, if you look at all these websites, and I would encourage the listener to do this, is they are all evangelical. They're all trying to get you to accept their point of view.
Yeah.
So the Evolution Society, so this is the Society for the Study of Evolution. And if I go to their About page, they have a history, a mission and vision, a diversity statement,
Uh-oh.
a statement against racism and racial injustice,
What?
a code of ethics, financial reports. And I mean, if you just...
I get the financial reports.
But the point is if you just go deep into their website, they're really just all about dumping on Christians ultimately. This is one that's actually science related, right? And they're essentially, but point is like you guys are a religion. Sure. Why, if you believe in materialistic evolution, why do you have a statement about racial injustice on your webpage? Yeah. And it's the same thing with BioLogos. You know, the theistic evolution Christians are really allergic to being associated with fundamentalist Christians. Yeah. And so they, on their About page, they have a statement on vaccines.
Oh, heavens. Okay.
And so my point to the listener is that if you're really hung up on the science of origins, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Do some research. Understand that you're a lay person. Everyone is going to, they're going to strongly advocate their own view, but you don't have to wreck your religion based on switching your views between any of these.
Well, yeah, and I guess to me the easiest argument is you're not going to know because no one knows. Sans God, no one knows what happened.
Yeah, to a certain extent, absolutely.
Lots of people make claims about what happened. There's no record of it.
And I think that goes for the creation of the universe and for life itself. So I think there's two major events. You have the creation event of the universe. And, and the Big Bang was proposed in the 1930s by a Jesuit. And that's why we know all the fundamentalist Baptists in the United States don't believe it. But all the secular scientists were really beat up about the Big Bang because, as we talked about earlier in this episode, the secular default for years was this is just like an infinitely cycling universe.
Infinite regress.
Yeah. And so I'll just read this funny quote. This is from Sir Fred Hoyle. He's the one who coined the phrase the Big Bang, and he did that in the 40s. And he did it as a derogatory thing. And he said he believed that the universe came from a continuing pattern of development with no beginning and no end. But over the years, this view was shared by fewer and fewer scientists as the Big Bang theory gained greater acceptance. However, Hoyle continued to robustly defend his view, and last year published A Different Approach to Cosmology. Last year, this was talking about... this was not actually last year. This is sometime in the 50s. Working with Herman Bondi and Thomas Gold, Hoyle proposed a steady-state theory in the 1940s. Every cluster of galaxies, every star, every atom had a beginning, but the universe itself did not. Oh, wow. That's kind of seeding the point that at some point something had a beginning, but I just don't want to admit that the universe does. And like what's going on now, if you read...
But then that's just, to me, that's just reduces to materials, right?
Yeah.
Then the universe is God, essentially. It is this goes back to, sort of our main tenets, right? That one of them is that there is a personal, self-existent origin to all that is in this thing we call God. Well, if it's not personal, it's just the universe, right? It's an impersonal, self-existent origin of all that is.
And what you'll see these really flashy headlines, like they're basically saying like, oh, we found the multiverse. We can just, prove, like what happened. The thing about science, and this goes back to the limitation.
Have you seen a headline like that?
Oh yeah.
Really?
That was this is one of the Lost Steel Creed episodes. That's the one, who did I say, who was on like Joe Rogan or something?
Oh, Brian something.
Brian, oh God.
Brian Greene?
Yeah, Brian Greene.
Okay. Brian
Greene is like, yeah, we've proven that we can't prove anything and anything's possible. He's like, wow, you're basically outside of science at that point.
Yeah,
because science is the realm of the observable.
Right. Yeah. If it's not empirical, it's not science. Full stop.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
So, for example, something like the Big Bang Theory, you can take a telescope and look back in time, and you can make a based on a model, say this is when the universe started.
Sure.
But that actual event, we have no understanding of how it even would have happened. And with the stars that we can see in the expansion of the galaxy, we have problems with that model because there's just, it's hard to test. And there seems like, well, what was going on with gravity? What was going on with this? Because it doesn't look right.
Right.
One example in this, and this is a really illustrative example, is spiral galaxies. So if you talk to someone who's like a young Earth creationist, for example, they'll say, well, spiral galaxies are evidence that the universe can't be more than, can't be very old. Because if you have, just based on Newtonian physics, these galaxies would spin out in a couple million years, and every galaxy we see should be a flat disk. Well, the reason we see spiral galaxies is because there's a bunch of dark energy out there. And it's somehow holding all these arms in these galaxies, it's keeping their structure together. But here's the thing about dark matter and dark energy. We've never observed it. It's just an assumption based off these gravity waves. And now I'm getting into stuff I don't understand. These astrophysicists are like, well, there's these gravity profiles and, this. And the reason there's these spiral galaxies is all this dark matter and dark energy that we've proven have never actually observed or proven existed.
Well, that isn't that what Neo is in the Matrix, right? He's the thing you need to make the equation complete.
Yeah. So the point is that someone who might be a young Earth creationist would say, well, this is proof I'm right. And I would say, no, it's not. But if you're a material evolutionist, you're like, well, there's dark matter up there. It's just, holding it all together. It's like, so you're saying that a non-observable, confirmable force is holding the entire universe together.
He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the whole world in his hands. So, it cuts both ways. And I love reading about this stuff, but years and years ago, I quit, putting any sort of weight behind how I'm going to live my life behind it.
And that's what it comes down to with all these things is, suppose on Monday you're a young Earth creationist and on Tuesday you're a theistic evolutionist. What difference does it make in your life? I don't see any. And if I can't, again, this goes back to the Powers of 10 video, right? Is that there's way more stuff in this universe than we have time to examine. And I'm just not going to examine things for which I see no change in the behavior resulting from the conclusion.
Yeah, and the people who advocate for these things, I think they have their own sacred cows. For example, the Francis Collins crowd, they just want to be liked by the Democrats. And I'm not saying that those people aren't Orthodox Christians, but a vast majority of them just want to be liked by modern Western society, liberal society.
I must admit, I do get the distinct impression that there are some Christians who they just really want people to think they're intelligent and cool and intellectual. And so they dispense with
and that's not to say there aren't a lot of really smart Christians out there who believe in that, who truly believe in it. But I think a lot of the motivation is cultural and political.
That's been my intuition.
Yeah.
I can't say what goes on in others' mind, but that's always been my intuition.
I think on the young Earth side, and in the young Earth side, here in the States, it's mostly, fundamentalists. Fundamentalist isn't a great term. It's low church Protestants, but there's young Earth creationists in every tradition of the Christian faith. And what's interesting is they argue differently. Mm-hmm. So if you have an Orthodox or Catholic person who's a young Earth creationist, they'll say all the church fathers believed it. That's
really?
kind of where they'll start.
Okay.
And they'll get theological. And the one strain that is the same between all of these groups of people who are young Earth creationists is that it's mostly coming from a theological presumption. And for example, someone who's more traditional Christian, they're going to say, and Ken Ham would say this too, but their main feel is like, this is what the fathers taught, and it doesn't really match with God's character to have millions and millions and millions of years of death and destruction until we show up. You know,
Yeah.
you know, from the low church Protestant, they're coming at it from the Bible's like, well, if I don't believe this, then the Bible's not true,
Sure.
and that's not fair to the Bible.
Yeah,
know?
it's an interesting question. I don't know if we even had this conversation. Where do you fall on this?
I mean, I would say if I would probably see in the
I've got a gun pointed
the
at you,
fourth
Nathan.
the fourth category is the intelligent design guys.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing within what you would call the intelligent design movement,
Yeah.
there is such a proliferation of theories and arguing.
Yeah.
It's almost like, why would I want to be part of this group? You know, I would say that the Earth is a lot older than a couple of 10,000, 100,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the creation research guys, they did a radiometric dating thing because, you know, the conventional view of how old the Earth is in geology, it's about 4 billion years old.
Okay.
And the creationists is like, we're going to get some money together, we're going to do all this stuff, and we're going to come up with a number. And they came up with 500 million.
Okay.
You know, and so I would say between the fossil records, now the difference between the theistic evolutionist guys and the intelligent design guys is that the theistic evolutionists would say God kind of guided all that evolution, and it all basically happened the way the secular timeline says. Mm-hmm. The intelligent design guys wouldn't reject the secular timeline per se, but what they're pointing out is in the fossil record, first of all, the Cambrian explosion, which I'm sure you're familiar with, I want to say that was like 500 million years ago or so, there was more biological diversity at the life's beginning than there is now. So the amount of diversity has been decreasing, okay? Which in and of itself is interesting. But also there's been a lot of these extinction events. So there's been 5 or 6 large extinction events in the history of life. And what happens is you get a lot of species get cut off, and then totally different types of species to show up out of nowhere. And so the intelligent design guys are more like, look, if you just look at the fossil record, this isn't just some gradual one family tree. There's just new random life popping up all over the place. And actually, if you look at a evolution textbook that is just your standard, you see this, but they won't admit it. So the intelligent design guys, like I said, they're saying there's a lot of supernatural interference happening here. But what are you dealing with? You're dealing with fossils and rocks.
Right.
And then I think from the physics perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense to accept the paradigm that the universe is 14 billion years old. First of all, that isn't anywhere near enough time for life to randomly appear. So even if you believe that, it's not right. What could possibly change that? Well, you have some, and I'm not saying this can't happen, because what we know about the Earth and biology and geology is pretty well defined. Theoretical physics in some areas is really, really well defined. When you start looking at astrophysics, like I said, you start talking about that dark matter and that dark energy. We don't know how a lot of that works. So everyone's like, hey, we've nailed down the life of the universe. It's somewhere between like 13.6. And I would say as a paradigm, it's good to do that because we know the Earth is, there's a band there, right? Somewhere between 500 million and 4.5 billion. So if that's true, it's not outrageous to say, okay, I'm going to accept the paradigm that the universe itself is 13 billion years old. But I think the one thing that could probably change a lot of that would be some type of greater understanding in physics, astronomy, you know? But I don't see scientifically us ever getting to a place where like, yeah, this whole universe is only a couple thousand years old or 100,000 years old. I don't see it. And that comes from the earth sciences, you know, and it's not like I'm going to die on that hill. Like I was just explaining you some of these arguments. Like I said, you can go watch any of these guys' videos in any of these 4 groups, and as a layperson, changing your mind like every other day.
Sure. Yeah,
and the one thing the one knock on the creationists is, first of all, there's not that many. There are Harvard-trained scientists that are creationists. You know, they're out there. There's not that many of them. But what happens is that they come up with some type of gotcha observation. And then that gotcha observation will be pretty easily, not easily, but it will be explained. And then they keep advocating that. You know, because like, well, this is a great YouTube video. You know, like, and I don't know if they're doing this on purpose, but I would say, well, I think I would, like I was saying, the material evolutionists are doing the exact same thing with just denying basic thermodynamics. You know, so I'm not saying that the young Earth creationists are the greatest guilty party in this respect, but I do think, as far as Christians are concerned, if we're going to say we have those three groups, I've never met a Christian who's a materialistic evolution. You know,
I don't know
person.
how they could be.
I don't know how they could be.
Yeah.
But I think between those three groups, I guess I find myself mostly in the middle.
Okay.
The Bible, for example, the genealogies in Genesis, we've talked about in our Bible episodes. You know, there's a couple different versions of the Old Testament. We have the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament, and we have the Masoretic text. The genealogies in Genesis 1 through 6 add up to 7,500 years. You know how it's like, okay, we believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. Well, the genealogies in the Greek Septuagint, which may be potentially more original than the Masoretic text, have those same math and numbers adding up to 7,500 years and not 6,000. And everyone's like, if the answer in Genesis, guys, they start off every talk with, the first thing we have to accept, the presumption we're accepting, is that the Bible is the Word of God and it's the only thing we can rely on being 100% true. It's like, well, different manuscripts of Genesis 1 through 6 have different years in the genealogies. And you guys are landing on 6,000.
But surely there's an upper bound.
Well, that's
what they would argue, right?
Well, not exactly. Not some of them.
Okay.
You know, maybe. I mean, some young Earth guys will say, we'll spread it out to 10,000 years, and then that gets into the flood, because, for example, the flood, as just someone who's looking back through history, we came through the last ice age, somewhere between 10 and 11,000 years ago. There was a rise in sea level of over 400 feet. Okay. And just to give you some perspective on that,
Where would that take us if we started the East
highest
Coast?
point in the state of Florida is 350 feet. Okay? So, for example,
But it's still got to cover all that ground to get to it. That's my point. So, like, if you start on the East Coast, how far inland does that go?
it depends, but pretty far,
Okay.
up to the Appalachians.
Okay.
So, the thing is, today, about 10% of the world's population lives within 5 kilometers of the coast. Okay?
Okay.
And about somewhere between a third and 40% live within 50 kilometers of the coast.
Okay. Yeah, I can buy that.
All right? And we're a modern society. Back then, human beings needed to be close to water. Hey, just think about it. If we had 100-foot rise in sea level, just like all the climate alarmists would say, Los Angeles is gone, New York is gone, Tokyo is gone, London is gone. You know, most of the state of Florida is gone. Okay. You know, we have very good evidence, and like I said, I'm not an expert, but I, would trust that this is true, that somewhere around 11,000 years ago, and the thing when the Ice Age was ending, it was over the span of a couple thousand years. There was a couple big flood events. You have, if you listen to Joe Rogan, you have the guys on there talking about this, not the San Andreas, what is it? The Younger Dryas impact theory.
Ooh,
Is that a comet?
I'm unfamiliar.
So, you know about the Badlands in Washington?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically that huge glacier wall broke, and all this water ran down North America super, super fast and carved out all these big canyons and stuff, and it literally happened in the span of 3 days. Okay, so one of the theories is that a comet or asteroid rammed into the North American glacier and vaporized it.
Okay.
All right. And why would this be something that would be considered? So all the megafauna in North America from the Ice Age just disappeared. Your saber-toothed tigers, your mastodons, your giant sloths. And the theory is like, oh, the humans knocked them off. There wasn't enough humans to knock them off. There's just no way that happened. So there had to be some type of huge event. Now, I see all of that stuff. So basically, you take that 400 feet of extra sea level that was added on, that covered a little over 10% of the Earth's, it decreased the amount of land mass by about 10%.
Okay, sure.
So if you add any type of, the glaciers melting, the Earth getting knocked off tilt, I don't know if I think it was the movie like 2012. Do you remember that movie?
I never saw it.
Okay, well
I'm not a big disaster fan.
Okay, the stupid thing, I think it was that movie, is that they have arcs at the end because most of the world floods.
They have what at the end?
They have arcs at the end because most of the world floods.
Okay, sure.
So what the young Earth creationist guys, or some of them would get really hopped up about, is like, every mountain in the world had to be completely submerged and stuff like that. Well, to do that, like just Mount Ararat in Turkey, just take that for example, you need 3.5 times as much volume of water that exists in the oceans today to make that work. Mm-hmm. And that's not even to cover Everest. That's just to cover Mount Ararat where the ark might be. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that's a lot of water. Where's that water coming from?
Sure.
Whereas if you add something,
the heavens opened up and the recesses of the deep.
Right. You don't believe that? So, but like you add some type of asteroids, you add all these glaciers melting, you're going to have some major flooding events, and the human record records that. Mm-hmm. That pretty much all over the world, 10 to 15,000 years ago, there was major flood events happening. There was major stuff getting wiped out. And was it a worldwide flood? It depends what your definition of worldwide is.
Sure.
And if you look at the genetic records, you look at like mitochondria, we can see the mutations in things like certain parts of the DNA to kind of see like were there any genetic bottlenecks. And humans have had genetic bottlenecks. It's never gone down to 3 ladies.
I'm looking at one right now.
Yeah. And then, but the other thing is that humans have experienced a lot of genetic bottlenecks in their history, but most of the other most other animals have not. And it doesn't indicate that animal life 10,000 years ago, except the stuff that went extinct, got completely wiped out and started from, a pair or 7 pairs. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm not denying the narrative of Noah's Ark. Mm-hmm. I'm not denying that Noah's Ark is not some type of real history, or that there weren't animals on the boat, or that Noah didn't, or that there weren't. I'm not denying any of that type of stuff. All I'm saying is that I think that you can, you don't have to take it completely at face value and demand that you do, and not be a good Orthodox Christian.
Okay.
So.
I'm curious then, since we've been talking about this for a while, what do you make then of the idea of is there an original Adam, and if there isn't, what is the meaning of phrases? I know original.
I accept
sin.
that.
Okay, you do. Okay.
I don't, like I was telling you. I don't. I think Adam and Eve were real people. Okay. I think there's absolutely a possibility that there might have been other humans on the earth when they were created. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's any really good reason to deny the general narrative of Genesis 1 through 3 or whatever. And you got to remember too, Genesis 1, Eden is this lush, awesome place. And then Genesis 2, they're in like this kind of desert place. It's 2 different narratives all slammed together. That doesn't mean it's not true. You're gonna, if that's a true story, that narrative from Genesis 1 was written about somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And if Adam and Eve existed as historical people, they are back a lot. You could say maybe they're back 20,000 years, maybe they're back 30, maybe they're back 10, maybe they're back whatever the time frame is that you would say that they lived. Mm-hmm. It's huge distance of time between when they lived and when that narrative was written. Mm-hmm. And you had a lot of cataclysmic events happening in human history. So I would say it's like that narrative is an approximation of what happened. And I would believe that Eve sinned and that was bad and that they got kicked out of the garden. But I can't, say like, okay, let's go find those rivers probably existed, the Pishon, we have the Euphrates.
I was going to say the Tigris and Euphrates do.
And then I would assume that the Pishon, what was the other river?
I can't remember, there were 4 of them.
Was there, but if there was a flood that flooded the Arabian Peninsula and Mesopotamia, that was like Noah's flood, then it would be reasonable to assume that there's no evidence of those rivers left. So, and that once again flies in the face is if the Euphrates and Tigris are here today, if there was a global flood where, that raised the sea level 20,000 feet or something, there's going to be no evidence that the Tigris, the complete, geology of the world is going to change. The landmass might still be there, but a river that's, a couple meters deep is not going to still be left. So I think these issues are a lot more complicated and they're unfalsifiable.
And that goes to the main point, right? Which is that I don't think all the attention that's given to these things, I don't think they merit it in terms of the grander scheme of questions that we can be asking and exploring, save for, trying to rescue some view of the literal interpretation of Genesis. Now, I personally, I hold loosely to a young earth creation simply because I go, well, that's what's written there, and I'm just going to go with that until there's some reason not to. And then I move on with my life.
Well, I think one thing, and this is something that's talked about a lot, is that the Bible can be predictive. It absolutely has been that in the case of archaeology.
Correct.
So secular, grand poobahs, for example, 200 years ago were denying that the Hittites ever existed, that the Assyrians ever existed, that Nineveh was actually a real place. Mm-hmm. Then we found all these places.
Right.
This is happening on a yearly basis where we find some signet ring for some Jewish king in Israel, and they're like, oh, shoot, here's more real evidence that this person lived.
Sure.
And so the Bible is perfectly capable of being predictive. And I think with things like the Tower of Babel and the Table of Nations and human genetics, that it is approximating the truth. You know, I think some people get hung up as like, this has to have happened in this time. Like for example, in the 6,000 year timeline, the flood happened about 2,000 years ago. Well, the pyramids were built 4,500 years ago, probably, from the best that we can tell. In the Old Kingdom, we have king lists from pharaohs going back 5-ish thousand years. It's it's really hard for me to say the flood happened 4,000 years ago in that timeline.
Well,
I'm just giving you an example.
Yeah, sure.
And what I'm saying is you're missing the point. You want I think the Bible, I think Genesis 1 through 11 is perfectly, compatible with what actually happened in human history.
Yeah.
But I don't think the author was necessarily, I think the author of Genesis 1 through 11 was definitely, writing a polemic against Mesopotamian civilization. Mm-hmm. Because the Mesopotamian gods, the world came out of chaos and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the Jewish God says it came out of order and love, and all this type of thing. And so there's a lot going on there. And we get stuck putting our own cultural paradigms on those chapters in the Bible. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean there isn't something that can't be verified about human history that we could say that's compatible with the narrative in Genesis 1 through 11. That's what I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we should just throw Genesis 1 through 11 out and say it's completely mythical. What I am saying is that I don't think the author's original intention was to create a blow-by-blow timeline of how the earth started and, what happened in the first couple thousand years. That doesn't mean it's not a reflection of what actually happened, because I do believe that.
Sure. Well, I think I frankly just find it sufficient to say that what is the case, sort of by definition, right? There is a reality. This isn't a matter of opinion. There is a reality. There is a fact of what happened and what didn't happen. And we believe simultaneously that the Bible is the Word of God. And what we mean by that is that not necessarily that it's correct at every jot and tittle, but rather that it is sufficient to transmit the meaning that God intended, right? That's really what we mean in any sort of praxeological sense when we're speaking of the Bible as God's Word. And so, for instance, to take a much more mundane example, troop counts in battles or something like that.
Absolutely.
Do we really think that they just had a perfect multiple of 10? Of course not. But the point was to give a sense of magnitude and size, and give a sense of who was fighting who and when. And if that's the meaning that was intended to be communicated, that's sufficient.
Well, and to your point that God's word is supposed to communicate accurately what he intended.
Right.
We can't know what the original intention of the author was 3,000 years ago. We're implying that. Especially...
Well, what we do, yes, but what we can do is we can make a good faith effort to try to figure it out.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying was, for example, the age that we get for the universe of 6,000 years is deduced by calculating back the
genealogies.
The genealogies.
Yeah.
We can never know if that was what the original author intended us to do.
Correct.
It's just not, And so, and the only reason I point that out is because people will say, well, if you don't do that, then you're not really trusting the accuracy of the Word of God. It's like, that is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying Enoch wasn't a real person.
Well, do they trust
I'm not saying Noah wasn't a real person.
Do they trust the troop counts?
Yeah. or the counts and numbers for, umpteen million Jews walking around a desert.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't seem, and all of those are round numbers. There's been so many people who was like, there probably wasn't, I don't know what the number is, 3 million,
yeah.
Jewish people, Hebrews walking around the desert for 40 years. It doesn't seem very likely, especially later on in the narratives when it's just like there's only 100,000 Hebrews living in Canaan. It says there's just there's just a huge genocide and everybody died, But the point is, it's like we've never been able to come up with a way of crunching those numbers to make them lower, some consistent algorithm to make sense of those numbers.
Or my favorite example is my favorite chapter from the Bible, Numbers 7, where each tribe donates to the construction of, I think it's the tabernacle.
Okay.
But they all donate the exact same thing. And it's the exact same thing recorded 12 times in a row. It's like this many talents of gold, this many ounces of silver, and just like it's the most boring chapter in all of Scripture. It's like, what, are you going to tell me that those are the exact counts and measurements for everything that really they came up with? Or was it saying roughly, yeah, they all roughly gave the same thing, So anyway, I guess I don't get bent out of shape about that stuff because I'm confident of two things. There is a reality, and the Bible is God's word, which means that there is some way that these things cohere. And I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it, especially because I don't know how it informs action.
Well, and I would say as far as philosophy and just acceptance of reality, even the most radical young earth creationist has a better grasp of reality than the material evolutionist.
I totally agree.
And so I'm not trying to be super judgy of people. I like I said, I explain my personal view. I remembered this, and for example, my grandfather grew up in the Hitler Youth. Mm-hmm. He was a material evolutionist. But I very distinctly remember I was like 9 or 10 years old. We were mowing lawns. I was doing what I do. It was, free child labor for my grandfather. And something was on NPR about science. And I started talking to him about, I don't know, something young earth creation-y. About like, that's bull crap. The earth, that didn't happen that way. And so I remember he was really frustrated, and he got right out of the car, and my mom was right there, and he said, "Are you telling your kid that the world's only 6,000 years old?" I very distinctly have that in my memory, But I just look at the philosophy he grew up with.
Yeah.
That material evolutionist, that Nietzsche crap, that ended in genocide and war and total stupidity. Mm-hmm. And I would, if everyone was a young earth creationist or had that view of the world, there's no Nietzsche.
Yeah.
There's no Hitler.
We'd
There's no
be in much
eugenics.
better shape.
We'd be in much better shape.
Yes.
So, and what I would say is, with all of these groups, a blind squirrel finds a nut. So there are young earth creationists who are really committed scientists who are doing research, and they get published in Nature. They get published in, these things.
Hey,
their personal religious beliefs don't stop them from doing good science. And every once in a while, they're right about something, and people got to change their models. So,
well, yeah, and that's the thing with all that stuff. That gets back to my earlier point, which is that science, by its nature, is empirical. Mm-hmm. So if you have a theory, go look for the evidence and see what happens. I feel like we've pulverized the scientific question on this. I'd like to move on because that was more intellectual. This is more existential, which is, to me, the fact that there is a creator means that, among other things, that there is, because not only is there a purpose for me and a purpose for you, it is also the case that there is a harmony of purpose that can exist, so that you and I can fulfill our purposes in a way harmonious with each other. Like, we don't have to fight. We can in fact coexist peacefully, fruitfully, enjoyably together. But in the absence of a creator, you don't really know that. And you might say, well, I'm going to look for it anyway because it's the best thing I could think of. But not everybody agrees with that. And I think that's clear from the people who have, gone out and conquered and said, nope, we are not in fact going to coexist peacefully together. And so I think that to me, that's the thing that has really come to the forefront of my mind recently, which is that actually going back to your daughter's statement, have hope, Mommy? Yeah. Is that
There's hope, Mommy.
there's hope, Mommy. But absent a creator, there isn't hope. But with a creator, there is. And it has occurred to me recently that's the hope that sustains even in the midst of great ennui, even when you can't see it, even when we joke about Democrats on this show, right? But it's like, but we got to coexist with them somehow, right?
And I feel bad for them, like right now, the current iteration of the Democrats. They have no hope right now. Like, they have no hope of winning again.
Yeah.
But they also just have no hope in life. And so we want people who have, bought the weird stuff to just come back to some, reasonable religion, So-
Right. But the point is that I think a cynical person could easily say this divide is incurable. A house divided against itself cannot stand. There's no turning back. And it's like, no.
Who are you referring to? Which house?
Well, I guess I was just kind of quoting first Christ and then Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Yeah, the United States.
Oh, okay, the United States. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it applies worldwide, right? Like America coexisting with Russia, coexisting with China,
Mm-hmm.
North and South Korea coexisting together. Can this actually take place in a peaceful manner? And the answer is
trade
yes.
deals.
Yeah, and tariffs. Yeah, the big beautiful bill. Anyway, no, it totally makes sense if there's a creator that there is a harmonious way in which we can exist together. And so even when you're like, I personally, I experience bouts of ennui, and that's one of the things that sustains me is just keep going, just keep trying, because there is a way to conduct yourself appropriately. And in fact, that also applies in the midst of tragedy, right? Is that in the midst of tragedy, when, God forbid, but, you lose your wife and daughter in a car accident or something like that, right? If there is no God, there's no possible redemption for that. If there is a God, there is a way that you can act in a manner which will still strengthen yourself for the purposes for which you've been created and strengthen others around you.
I just started listening to Pillars of the Earth. Have you heard of Pillars of the Earth? Okay, Ken Follett. It's a really famous novel, I think published in like 1989, about a building of a cathedral. Okay?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And in the preface to this audiobook, he's like, I'm an atheist, but I just love these cathedrals and what motivated these people to do them and religion. And it's just like, well, then just be a Christian, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I heard about this book through another Christian. It's 41 hours long. You apparently really love this stuff. Why don't you just take the plunge?
Doors are open, brother.
But even I'm not very far into the book, there's a lot of suffering. It's medieval England. There's a lot of suffering, a lot of bad stuff going on. but there's a lot of hope, and that has to come from somewhere. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the hope of the first character, he's
Yeah,
a
go
stonemason, and he's just he's having all this terrible stuff happening to his family and himself, but he just keeps dreaming about the cathedral he's going to build. It's like, yeah, I mean, why dream about that unless there's a creator,
Right.
Why dream about the ability to create something when your life is total crap? If it's not.
If you
real.
can't give yourself to something higher, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there is nothing higher if there is no God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that brings me to the last point that I'll hit here, which is that, like we said earlier, when you act against purpose, you harm yourself. And so I think this leads to a reasonable question, which is, if God wanted us to assist in creation, so we are co-creators with God, and deviation from this causes us pain, well, why not just create inanimate tools the same way humans do, right? Like my laptop doesn't feel pain, I don't think, right? And my answer to this is yet another article of faith. So there's sort of the typical answer, which is this precludes the possibility of love, right? That's sort of a standard philosophical answer when people bring up the problem of evil or the problem of pain. But I give a slightly separate answer, which is an article of faith. It means that we would not enjoy the work of creation. And so I think you've certainly experienced this when you are doing something that you really feel is, as people say, in your wheelhouse, right? If it really is something for which you feel like, yeah, I was made for this, you experience joy in it, right? And similarly, if you go against it, you sometimes experience, again, ennui is probably the best word that I can use there.
What is that translated?
Ennui, existential angst.
Okay.
Yeah, it's what teenagers experience, and so that in fact that's one of my sort of tenets of faith, which is that God is creator, and He creates us in such a way so that when we perform those things for which we are created, we will experience pleasure. We will experience meaning. Of course, I cannot prove that, but it does inform action because it causes me to look for them. And so, that's my final statement. For summarizing, do you have anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. So then the summary then is, what does it mean that God is creator? Well, it means it makes sense to look for purpose. It makes sense to do science. We didn't really cover that so much in here, but Lewis makes that argument in Miracles. There is some sort of, what's the right way to say it, coherence to reality with the book of Genesis. It makes sense to look for harmony among individuals and people groups. It means that in the midst of tragedy, there is a way that you can conduct yourself properly. And it means that it makes sense to use meaning itself as an indication of your purpose, the sensation of meaning.
And just real quick, because
Yeah.
I know we said a couple of things. I just want to clarify one thing. Would you say that, because we want to know where we came from, that also seems like a human thing.
That's a very human question.
That the scientific study of origins is a useful exercise, even if it's just from a human yearning to know.
Yeah, I think it's a, what's the right way to say this? I think it's an existential exercise using the wrong tool.
Okay.
Like science is not it's not the correct tool to answer that question because this goes back to the point earlier. Science is an intellectual mechanism of negation. Mm-hmm. Science will never affirm from whence any of us came. It will only tell you, at best, from whence you did not come.
So would you tell paleontologists they're wasting their time?
I don't know. Are they getting grant funding?
Because I guess where I land on like the
inquiry.
science and all the debates, like I understand that there's not as much. I think we give science more credit than we can, but I think there is usefulness in looking at the stars or looking at the rocks.
Well, yeah, of course.
You know, or
Of course.
or sequencing the genomes.
Yeah,
you know, I
I'm
think
not
that's very
I'm not
useful.
debating any of that stuff. I'm
Yeah.
not debating its use. I mean, look, man. I mean, you can give very easy arguments for those things. Why look at the stars? Well, among other things, you can navigate by them, right?
Yeah, but just not everything's not utilitarian in and of itself.
Well, okay, fine, but then that's just a.
I agree with you though.
Yeah,
but,
it's yeah. I mean, people can study whatever they want.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, science is an improper. It's the wrong tool if you want to know from whence you came.
Okay.
You have to look to something beyond it. Science
Sure.
can assist, but it cannot answer the question.
Okay. Let me ask you again. Is it okay to use science to assist some of these things?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, it helps you get rid of dumb ideas.
Okay.
that's one of the brilliant things about it. When I program my computer, do you know how many times I programmed my computer to test out different theories I had? And it's just like, it might as well have just sent back text that says you're an idiot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, science is great for those things. So,
All right.
Well,
Petra will see you out.
This has been another episode of the Steel Creed Show on Earth as it is in heaven.